Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Cam, and this is going to be a bit of a different video than I usually do. Because at the beginning of this year, I said to myself that I was going to see more new releases this year. Because, well, I didn't review a ton of new releases last year because of, well, you know. And even though it's a trendy thing to do, I don't review a ton of Netflix or Amazon or Hulu movies. Not for any reason other than I think their quality is just kinda lesser. I can't tell you how many times I've started a movie either on Netflix or Amazon or something like that, them being originals, and just shutting it off like 20 minutes in. And I'm like, that's it, I'm done. But this year, and especially now, since at the time of this recording, movie theaters are starting to slowly reopen again, I think it's now as good a time as any to start a new series called the New Release Roundup, where I review all of the new releases that I saw in a given month in one video. Now, I saw all of these movies in my local theater. It's about 15 minutes away from me. There's a theater 5 minutes away from me, but it's a Regal, and they're still closed. And I know what a lot of you are thinking. Am I concerned about COVID and all that stuff? And yes, I am. However, all of the experiences that I've had in this COVID era of going to a theater, I've had nothing but positive things to say. These theaters are taking this stuff very seriously. Everything is shiny and clean. You have to wear a mask everywhere, social distance and seating and all of that. If there is a precaution, they are most certainly taking it. I mean, you can't even get refills on your popcorn anymore. That is the state of things. And if there was a danger, I just simply wouldn't go. I've been very comfortable going to the theaters since they have reopened in June or July, and I will continue to go as long as I am able. With that said, though, as far as January and February of 2021 goes, well, I didn't see as many new releases as I wanted to, because let's just say there was some rather uprooting going on in my personal life. Things are now stable, thank goodness, but it got a little hairy for a while. In total, I saw 7 new releases in theaters, and I'm going to be reviewing all of those. And if you'd like to hear me talk about a certain movie, all the movies I do talk about will be listed in the description below, as well as time codes. So if you want to hear me talk about, like, say, Minari, or Our Friend, or something like that, the time code will be in the description, and you can just forward to there. But for right now, let's dig in and talk about the movies that I saw from January 2021. News of the World was directed by Paul Greengrass, the director of the Bourne trilogy. I said trilogy. And it starred Tom Hanks as a man named Captain Kidd, who is a Civil War veteran, though fighting on the Confederacy. He makes a living nowadays going from town to town and reading the news to people. Newspapers did exist back then, but what makes Captain Kidd different is that he reads the stories in a very dramatic way. And even in a post-Civil War world, information didn't really travel all that far. However, he encounters a young girl who was captured by the Kiowa Indian tribe, and he is enlisted to take her back to what remains of her family, much to his chagrin. And her chagrin, for that matter. However, over the course of time, they do bond. Outside of the Bourne trilogy, Paul Greengrass also directed Captain Phillips, which also stars Tom Hanks. So the combination of Paul Greengrass and Tom Hanks usually works, and it does in this movie. I'm not going to sit here and say that this is the movie that you absolutely need to see right now, but as far as News of the World goes, I quite enjoyed it. It's Tom Hanks, so of course he is going to be great in most of the things that he is in, and he is the best part of this movie here. He's a very soft-spoken guy. He is clearly guilty about fighting in the Confederacy in the Civil War, but he can absolutely throw down when he has to. Among my favorite scenes in the movie are when he is getting into some gunfights with some outlaws. And there is a scene where he runs out of bullets, and the little girl finds him some spare change. He stuffs it into some shotgun shells and shoots one of the outlaws with the coin-filled slugs. I also liked the little girl played by Helena Zengel. She worked very well off of Hanks. There's clearly a Logan-esque dynamic where there's a big guy and a little girl and they clash, but it works, it does work very well. My biggest problem with this movie is that, well, there's a lot of themes about how, there's still a lot of racism going on. I mean, it's 2 years after the Civil War, so of course that's happening. And, well, there's some commentary about this little town who has their own newspaper, and it was blatantly a commentary about state-run news, or town-run news in this case. And when I was watching that, I was thinking to myself, I wonder which former president Paul Greengrass is trying to mock here. It really makes you think. Thankfully, though, that's just one scene. Outside of that, the movie is fairly good when it comes to its message being more subtle. But at the end of the day, like I said, I don't think News of the World is necessarily like the movie you're missing out if you need to see it, but if it's on rental or if it's on demand, I'd say check it out. And on my scale of amazing, great, good, forgettable, and horrid, I'd say that News of the World is a good movie. The Marksman was directed by Robert Lorenz, who is primarily known as a second-unit director on many Clint Eastwood movies, including Mystic River and $1 Million Baby, and it stars Liam Neeson. It tells the story of a rancher, played by Neeson, who lives on the U.S.-Mexico border, and after a tussle with the drug cartel, he must take an orphan boy to his remaining family in Chicago. Let me just be upfront and say that I get that Liam Neeson is getting up there in years, so maybe this kind of movie is not for them. I totally get it. But for me, Liam Neeson movies are like pizza. Even the bad ones are still enjoyable. And this is definitely not a bad one. I actually enjoy this movie a lot more than I thought I would. But again, please keep in mind, this is a Liam Neeson movie. Let's just say his days in movies like Schindler's List are long behind him. But with that being said, this was far more enjoyable than it had any right to be in my eyes. I like how kind of a throwback this movie felt like, and I know when people try to throw it back to something like the 60s or the 70s, it kind of falls on their face. But this movie is a throwback in how it films its action and how it films the characters. I was honestly very surprised to see a lot of practical stunts in this movie. Hell, there's a car chase where they flip an actual car. Like, it took me a second to be like, wait, did they just flip a car? And they very much did. And there are a lot of gun battles that feel very raw and just, they don't feel like they were made in 2021. But this movie is indeed a throwback in that, well, let's just say that there are a lot of things that definitely belong in the 80s. I will say this, if this exact movie and premise were being made in the 1980s, it would star Arnold Schwarzenegger. If it were made in the 90s, I mean, take your pick. Stallone, Bruce Willis, Jean-Claude Van Damme, take your pick and it would work. But this movie is not trying to be the next Citizen Kane, it's not trying to be anything more than it is. I think the biggest compliment that I could say is that this movie knows exactly what it is, what it's trying to convey, and in that respect, it does it successfully. I'm going to give this movie a good rating. I think it's, again, similar to News of the World. It's not something you should rush out to see, but I think for me personally, it was very enjoyable. And let's round out the month of January by talking about Our Friend. And man, this is a difficult movie to talk about. Not because of content, but just this movie destroyed me. Let's just get into it. Our Friend was directed by Gabriella Copperwaith, and it starred Dakota Johnson, Jason Segel, and Casey Affleck. And it was based on an article in Esquire magazine. It tells the story of a married couple played by Dakota Johnson and Casey Affleck. They learn that Dakota Johnson has a terminal illness. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. She is going to die in a very short time. And while all this is going down, their mutual friend named Dane, played by Jason Segel, decides to move in and help shoulder the final burdens, including helping their daughters and just trying to help Casey Affleck as much as he can. I did not see a trailer for this movie. I honestly didn't even really know what this movie was about. I read the synopsis on IMDb, but that's about it. And I almost cried. This is easily one of the most emotional movies that I have watched in a very long time. Firstly, let's talk about the acting, because it is stellar across the board. This is the best performance that I have ever seen from Jason Segel. And I have been very hot and cold on him. Like, there are some times where in, like, the Muppets movie where I'm like, okay, you seem like a nice guy, but then there are movies like Sex Tape where I just want to punch him in the face. But this is his best performance that I've ever seen from him. The movie does a good job of showing that Dane is that one friend who is just... He has nothing really going for him in his life. He has a mediocre job. He's been in and out of relationships. Like, he just kind of floats in and out of life. And in a way, it's kind of his destiny to try and help out his friends through this very trying time. There's a scene in which, years before all of this happened, he just bottoms out. He becomes incredibly depressed, and so he decides to head out to the desert to conceivably die. And while he's out there, he runs into this German woman who's like, "Are you out here to die?" And he's like, no. And she tells him this story about how 5 years before that, she had come out to this exact same spot because she had bottomed out in her life, and basically gives him a pep talk of trying to find a purpose. And then as he goes back to his car, he finds that Casey Affleck and Dakota Johnson, they called him saying, "Hey, where are you at? We miss you." And he hears the daughters on the voicemail too, and it's a very funny voicemail, but the movie does a good job of showing that he listens to it over and over and over again. And he's like, okay, I have something to live for. And he drives back. And this is the kind of friend that I would hope to have, because he just accepts everything. And he's like, you need me to do this? Okay, I'll go and do that. He goes through a lot of crap in this movie, especially from Dakota Johnson at near the bitter end. Let's just say as the illness gets worse, it starts to kind of degrade her brain, and she gets pretty sour at him, and he stays the course. And I would hope to have a friend like that. And it's movies like this that make me realize that Dakota Johnson, as far as her career is concerned, well, 50 Shades of Grey was just a foot in the door, and she is actually a really good actress. I hope she gets nominated for, if not this, for something, because she is great. And as far as Casey Affleck goes, again, I kind of go hot and cold on him, but he is really good in this as well. He sells just the emotional toll that this is taking on him, and just, you really do feel sorry for the guy. Especially involving the daughters, because, well, you see the scene where they break the news that Dakota Johnson's going to die to the daughters, and they don't edit it. They don't try and say, like, oh, mommy's going on a vacation. The first scene in the movie is saying we should avoid language like that. We should just break it to them. And it sucks. It really does. But it's one of those things that is truly necessary. My one lone complaint about this movie is the editing. This movie goes back and forth from the past to the present and even into a little bit of the future at a rapid pace, to the point where they try and do a thing where they say certain date, 2011, 5 years before diagnosis, or something like that. And I got massively confused at a certain point. But even still, when you can figure out what time it is in that movie, it's still excellent. I have a feeling that this will miss out on a lot of awards, but if I were running things, I'd at least nominate Jason Segel. I'm going to give this movie an amazing grade. It's just fantastic. But that's all for January. Now let's move into February, starting with Judas and the Black Messiah. This was directed by Shaka King, I believe in her directorial debut, and it starred Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield, among others. And this is based on a true story. It tells the story of Fred Hampton, played by Kaluuya, who is the leader of the Illinois Black Panthers. Throughout a period in the late 1960s, he slowly starts to get more influence and tries to form a rainbow coalition of the Black Panthers and the Puerto Ricans and pretty much all of the minorities to try and take it to the cops. Enter FBI agent William O'Brien, played by Lakeith Stanfield, who joins the Black Panthers as a ruse to try and eliminate Hampton. I love true stories like this. I listen to true crime podcasts all the time, and I love these little stories in American history that you don't read about in most history books. I like learning about new stuff like this, and when it comes to this story, I had no idea what I was getting into. And yeah, the praise that this movie has been getting is more than earned. Firstly, let's talk about Daniel Kaluuya, because I have a feeling that he will win the Oscar for Best Actor. He's already won the Golden Globe at the time of this recording, and deservedly so. I've always been a fan of his acting, even though I'm not a big fan of Get Out. Though he did stand out in Black Panther, and he was excellent in Judas and the Black Messiah. What I loved about his portrayal is that they showed him as just a regular guy. Like, he could make the fiery speeches, and he makes plenty of those, but behind closed doors, he's just a dude. He has likes and dislikes. He loves his girlfriend, and he loves his child eventually. Given what happens to him, you really do feel sorry because of what is going to happen. But, you just can't change that. It's one of those things where it's like, you hope the thing you know is going to happen doesn't happen, but you know deep down that it will. I also really enjoyed Lakeith Stanfield as William O'Brien. I'm not 100% familiar with the rest of his work, though what I have seen from him, the limited amount that I have, I've always enjoyed. And I don't know if he'll get nominated, but I hope that he does. And I guess my lone complaint with this movie is that I wanted to see more. I wanted to learn more about the Rainbow Coalition that didn't pan out. I wanted to see the Black Panthers make a tenuous alliance with the rednecks and all of them. I wanted to see that happen. But I feel like the movie is like, okay, we touched on that, we gotta move on. The movie feels constrained by the 2-hour length, and that's not the fault of the director or any of the actors, certainly not. It's just, this story is so loaded and so important that you just have to be like, wait, what happened here? We can't move on. There's so much more story to tell. When I was doing the Hidden Gems podcast with Rachel over at Rachel's Reviews, I said in my mini review of this movie that this movie demands to be made into an HBO-style miniseries, like Band of Brothers or something. Like, explore more of the little avenues and like make a slow burn into what eventually happened. But that's really a nitpick in the grand scheme of things, because this is one of the finest movies of 2020 and going into 2021. I'm going to give this movie an amazing grade. I have a feeling that this will win a ton of awards. Will it win Best Picture? I really don't know, but I think the smart money is on Judas and the Black Messiah. Minari was directed by Lee Isaac Chung, and it starred Steven Yeun, among others. And it, quite simply, tells the story of a Korean family who have immigrated to the United States and have moved to Arkansas to start a new life for themselves. Also, I want to give a shout out to Movie Emporium, who recommended this movie, saying it was one of the best of last year. You were right on about that. I walked out of that movie saying to myself, wow, that was amazing. May have been a spoiler for my rating, but even still, this movie is fantastic. Firstly, let's talk about Steven Yeun. He should be nominated for a lot of awards, but I don't think that he will. And that's a shame, because he was my favorite part of the movie. He has a dream of building this farm, and that's his version of the American dream. He wants it so badly. And it just, every time he takes 5 steps forward, he takes 10 steps back. It's really sad. There's a scene near the very end of the movie where he says, I need my children to see me succeed at something. Like, that's just kind of heartbreaking right there. And what I loved about this movie is that I love the dynamic between the family, because it's not like the idyllic of like, oh, we all love each other and it's great. Like, no, they bicker, they fight, but at the end of the day, they know that they love each other, so everything kind of gets settled at the end. There are more than a fair share of difficult moments, let's just say that, but when they do make up, or they do follow through to fruition, you do feel a tremendous amount of gratitude. If I had one minor nitpick with the movie, is that there are some scenes that just stuck out in a kind of weird way. Like, for example, there's this character, I believe his name is Paul, and there's a scene where the Korean family are on their way home from church, and they see him literally carrying a cross like Jesus did. I can say, as a man of faith, I've never done that, and I have never known anyone that has done that. Let's just get that out of the way right now. I've also seen online that there are people who are like, Minari is an American movie, like it's about the American dream. And normally when it comes to that discourse on film Twitter, I kind of shun away from it because it relies more on buzzwords, and I'm just not a fan of it. However, I kind of agree with them. This movie is about the American dream. It's about an immigrant family coming to America saying, hey, I'm going to make something out of myself and try and lift my family out of this hell. And that's what they try to do. And I'm going to say Minari is amazing. It's among my favorite movies that I saw over the past 2 months. And I've still got one more that's like 1 and 1A with this movie. The Little Things was directed by John Lee Hancock, who also directed The Founder, and it starred Denzel Washington, Rami Malek, and Jared Leto, among others. And it tells the story of a local sheriff, played by Washington, who travels to LA for a simple evidence pickup. However, he is soon wrangled into a serial killer case, which is headed up by Rami Malek's character, and they soon narrow the suspects down to this one very creepy looking guy named Jared Leto. But did he really do all of those murders? I was actually pretty excited to see this movie. But then Rachel, over at Rachel's Reviews, my podcast partner, when we did our best and worst of Denzel Washington, listed this as her least favorite Denzel movie. And I'm not gonna lie, it kinda took the wind out of my sails. And then I saw other reviews where it was less than favorable, let's just say that. And then there was one review that compared this movie to Seven, in that, like, Seven is regular Coca-Cola and this movie is like Diet Coke. Having now seen both Seven and The Little Things, I can safely say that that comparison is absolutely just wrong. Like, comparing Seven to The Little Things is just wrong because they both involve serial killers. It's like comparing Seven to The Silence of the Lambs. They're two completely different things. And this discourse was not helped by the fact that Jared Leto got nominated for a Golden Globe for this. And people were like, Leto gets nominated over Delroy Lindo of The Five Bloods, and just the award shows are just terrible. And I'm just sitting there like, you're just realizing now that the award shows are complete garbage? But nevertheless, I saw the movie anyway, and I really liked it. Firstly, my favorite part of this movie was the acting, because it was great across the board. I mean, Denzel is gonna be Denzel, even if it's in a movie that I don't like. He is usually the best part of it, and he is the best part of this movie here. I also really enjoyed Rami Malek. I feel sorry for him that he had to be tied up in that whole Bohemian Rhapsody crap. Like, he was the best part of the movie, quite frankly. And none of that crap was his fault. So whenever I see him in something, I am going to give him the benefit of the doubt, because he is really good, and he was really good in this movie. But I think the best part out of all of this was Jared Leto. When I heard that he got nominated, I'm like, oh boy, people are going to be upset. And yeah, they were kind of upset, but now that I've actually seen his performance, it was actually really good. The movie does a great job of showing that, yeah, He's a bit off kilter. He's very weird. But it plants the seeds of doubt of, did this guy really do the things that they accuse him of doing? And this is kind of where the Seven comparison loses steam for me, in that when you eventually do see John Doe, you're like, that's him. Like he admits to it, but I mean, no, not just because it's Kevin Spacey, but just you look at him, you're like, yeah, he could probably do a lot of the things that they say he could do. But the movie does a good job of throwing you off the scent in planting the seeds of doubt of, he can be mean at times. Like I said, he's very weird. He somehow likes pineapple on pizza, which should be a crime, but I don't think he killed anyone. And without giving anything away, let's just say that there's a big mystery that is left unclear. And I wanted to see more of it. This is a John Lee Hancock movie, and he doesn't necessarily remake any storytelling devices that haven't been told in 100 other movies. But at the end of the day, The Little Things, I think, is very underrated. I'm going to give it a great rating. Not like top tier quality, but it's definitely above average for a kind of movie like this. And now let's close out February by talking about Nomadland. This was directed by Chloe Zhao, who is going to be directing the Eternals movie for the MCU, and it starred Frances McDormand as a woman who lives as a modern-day nomad after losing everything during the Great Recession. Seems rather pedestrian for a plot, but that's the plot. What can I say? I had heard nothing but amazing things about this movie, saying it's the movie of the year, it's going to win all these awards, and I usually take a lot of that stuff with a grain of salt, but now that I've actually seen it, I totally get it, because this movie is fantastic. Firstly, let's talk about Frances McDormand, because this is her movie. She is in, like, every scene. There's no way, like, this could be related to anything else. She is the best part of this movie. She is the beating heart of this movie. And it's Frances McDormand, so of course she is going to be excellent. She somehow made a Transformers movie watchable, and that's miracle work right there. The only other recognizable actor in this movie, at least for me, was David Strathairn, and he was really good as usual here. But I think the biggest compliment that I could give to this movie is that how real it feels. This movie covers a year of this woman's life and how she's a nomad and how it's not like we're going on a road trip. Like, no, she has to consider, how is she going to make money? How is she going to pay for these things? The movie does a great job of showing that it's not as romantic as you might seem it to be. And because of that, you also get these little moments of just, I don't know how to describe it, but you get these little moments with these nomads and how they have this weird sort of contentment with their life. Like, if one of my favorite nomads was a woman named Swanky, and she has a moment where, I guess a spoiler, but basically she tells Frances McDormand's character that she's dying. She has lung cancer and it has gone to her brain. She only has a limited amount of time. But she gives this kind of calm monologue about how she's not afraid of dying and how it was going to come eventually, so she would like to go out on her own terms. I know this is a weird comparison, but it reminded me a lot of the opening of The Great Gig in the Sky from Pink Floyd, how the guy you hear goes, I'm not afraid of dying, any time will do. You gotta go sometime. So you get these little moments of people who are clearly not actors, but you also weirdly like them, and it gives this movie depth and just a great sense of itself. This could have clearly been just like an over-dramatized, like we will show you how this is done. No, this movie, and I hate using this term, but it feels like a slice-of-life movie. And this is one of the better ones that I've seen. This is getting an amazing grade. Wow, three amazing grades in this video. Am I a little generous? I suppose so, but I mean, I love movies. Movies are very hard to make, so I guess I'm easily impressed, but, whatever. So, my question to you all is, what movies did you see this month? Whether it be at home, or in theaters, or on demand, whatever it is. Leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you all were watching these past couple months. And this will be a recurring thing in March, April, May, and so on and so forth. But if you like this video, please be sure to leave a like, comment your thoughts down below, and if you like this video and you want to see more like it, hit the subscribe button and click the bell to allow notifications. That way when a new video drops, you'll be the first to know about it. My name is Ryan Cam. I'll see you in the next one.